Chapter 1 Hunters of the Dark Night. Chapter 1 Hunters of the Dark Night. Neon lights, night colors, dance music, and stars almost lost in the thick night. Trivandin, this city that never sleeps on the terracotta continent, is still colorfully rendered in another night, attracting tourists from all over the world to come and see her beauty. The dazzling nightlife is the most beautiful drug. Everyone wandering on the street seems to be immersed in crazy happiness and unable to extricate themselves. Two figures floated in the dim alley, swaying and overlapping under the dim yellow streetlight. There was a strange smell in the air, sweet and dangerous, as if something disturbing was stirring in the darkness. With a low groan, a trail of blood snaked down the white and tender neck. The pale girl fell into a pair of strong arms and was then lowered to the cold and dirty ground of the alley by a man in a black cloak. The silver teeth reflected a cold light under the light, and hidden in the cloak was a bloodless face. If he stood in the daylight, he would be a handsome young man. However, the sight of two sharp teeth that could bite off a neck in the darkness of the night only made people shudder. After finishing foraging, the cloaked young man turned around and walked away. However, before his feet had even taken a step, someone was already blocking his way at the end of the alley. Can you please stay? The crimson eyes narrowed slightly, and the young vampire stared at the uninvited guest. A white coat, round glasses, cheap black sweater, and khaki trousers, and the harmless smile of an animal could even be said to be a bit weak. A strange man who looked like a poor scholar blocked him in the alley. A vampire hunter from the Blood Affairs Department? The cloaked young man showed a cold smile. A lackey of the Red Parliament. Few people could get this close without being noticed by the vampires. This poor scholar must not be an ordinary passerby. No, I don't represent any official organization. As if he was afraid of being misunderstood, the scholar waved his hands repeatedly with a panicked expression on his face. I am a doctor from a nearby private clinic. My name is... Who cares what your name is? Dash, with an impatient shout, the vampire youth tapped his left foot on the ground and rushed forward like an arrow. The black cloak was raised high, and the two sharp teeth between the young man's lips reflected the cold light. Your body, which has just finished foraging and is full of energy, needs some exercise. This inexplicable person in front of you should be regarded as dessert. Facing the sudden attack of the vampire, the scholar stood motionless, as if he was frightened. The young man raised the corners of his lips happily and cruelly, and his unrolled cloak stirred up a gust of cold wind. However, just when the sharp teeth were about to bite the scholar's neck, a slight sound suddenly exploded between the two of them. The young man's movements froze for an instant, and his body suddenly froze as if the pause button had been pressed. The crimson pupils shrank slightly, and then he saw the scholar's right hand inserted in his coat pocket, which seemed to be holding something. There was a small hole in the bulging pocket, and a trace of smoke was coming out of the hole. There was a faint smell of gunpowder in the air, and without the young man noticing it, this human actually shot him. He looked down at his chest in disbelief. There was also a small black hole there. When he saw the gurgling blood flowing from the wound, his eyes suddenly twisted. It is impossible for ordinary weapons to cause harm to the vampire's body. What this human shot at him was actually a pure silver bullet. When he realized this, the cold pain slowly penetrated the vampire's body from the heart and soon took away all his ability to move. Staring at the scholar in white, who was still smiling, a strange look suddenly appeared in the vampire's eyes. I know you are, Silver Bullet. Dash, he yelled out a sentence with difficulty. At the same time as he yelled the last word, the young man's body suddenly stiffened like a puppet with broken strings, and then he slowly and heavily fell to the ground. Don't give me an inexplicable nickname. You should listen carefully when you introduce yourself just now. Forget it, it's too late to say this now. Shaking his head with a helpless expression, the scholar in white walked up, squatted in front of the dead young vampire, rolled up his sleeves, took out something that looked like tweezers, and took out the silver bullet from the young man's wound. The evidence of the crime must be completely eliminated. Then we have to get down to business. While muttering to himself, he took out a lot of experimental equipment from his pocket and placed it on the ground. The dim light dragged out his long shadow, occasionally swaying gently on the ground. Not far away, the noise coming from the downtown area and the silence here seemed to be the product of two worlds. Ordinary humans immersed in the carnival did not realize that on this gorgeous night, as always, something had begun to grow quietly in the darkness. It was reported that another young woman was attacked by a vampire last night, causing hemorrhagic shock. Fortunately, the rescue was timely and her life was not in danger. The police also found the body of a young vampire at the scene. It was inferred that it was the work of the Vampire Hunting Agency, Blood Affairs Department. However, the vampire had strange gunshot wounds on his body, and leaving the body at the scene is not in line with the usual style of the department. Therefore, the police will also conduct a follow-up investigation into this bizarre incident. Of course, it doesn't fit the bill because it's not someone from the affairs department who did it in the first place. The morning news was being broadcast on the TV, and at the same time lazily talking to himself came from the corner of the room. A young man with a nightcap on his head was sleepily inserting a toothbrush into his mouth. The young man has an easygoing face, looking soft and non-aggressive. The messy silver-gray short hair seems to imply that he is not yet fully woken up from his sleep state. The puppy print pajamas on his body give him a laughable temperament all over his body. Mr. Luo Lant, a young doctor, is facing his usual ordinary, lazy, and unmotivated day. Since moving to the city 5 years ago, Laurent has been running this small private practice as a physician. Occasionally, patients come to the clinic, but business is slow most of the time. Therefore, Luo Lant gradually develops a lazy character and even feels that she has entered the life of an elderly person ahead of schedule. After washing up, having breakfast, and watching the news, Luo Lant finally woke up slowly and put on her round glasses. The pair of light-colored eyes that are magnified behind the lenses add a touch of intellectual temperament to him, making him look a little bit like a doctor. After sneaking into the kitchen, Laurent stood in front of the huge double-door refrigerator, holding her chin with a troubled expression. Half a minute later, he made up his mind and suddenly opened the door on the left, but what appeared before his eyes were jars of dark red plasma in beakers. Oh! Dash! The smell of blood hit her face, causing Luo Lant to immediately kick the refrigerator door and run to the sink to vomit in fear. After vomiting for a long time, he staggered into a chair and gasped, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. We made a mistake again. He looked at the huge refrigerator sadly. Luo Liani has many shortcomings, and one of them is that she can't tell right from left. He should have opened the door on the right to get a can of his favorite orange juice, but unfortunately, he opened the door on the left and saw his collection, or should I say, experiment. Luo Lianti was a little dizzy. If she smelled blood without wearing a mask, she would feel nauseated and vomited. In severe cases, she would faint, but he is such a weirdo with a strange physique. Not only is he a doctor by profession, he is also secretly conducting mysterious blood research. To be precise, vampire blood research. Humans and vampires have coexisted on this red earth continent for thousands of years. Each side has its own territory and does not interfere with each other. No one knows when the change started. It seems that suddenly one day, vampires invaded human territory and began to attack humans crazily. In order to protect themselves, the Red Parliament, the supreme ruler of the human world, established the Blood Affairs Department, a vampire hunting agency. There are countless strange rumors about them, but Luo Lianti is not a gossip. Due to the rigorous scientific attitude of a doctor, he hopes to study the difference between vampires and humans in terms of blood. Of course, this is purely personal research and has never received any official recognition. With such great ambitions, Laurent is very lucky to have reflexes that are far better than ordinary people. So he always walked around the city, like a ghost at night with a homemade pistol, looking for vampires that attacked humans, killing them and collecting their blood to take home for research. In fact, hunting vampires without official approval is illegal, and if caught, it is normal for them to be sent to an isolated island at sea to do hard labor. However, Luo Lianti, who is lazy by nature, has always been slow to deal with this aspect of the matter. She always wanders around the city every night with no sense of tension and the negative emotion of it doesn't matter if she is caught. The lazy Dr. Luo Lianti lived a lazy life in Trinvanden with such a lazy mood. He is very satisfied with this life. However, life seems a little strange today. Half an hour later, while standing by the window drinking orange juice with a happy face, Laurent saw a man standing on the street outside, staring at the empty room next to his clinic for a long time. It was a strange man, slightly younger than himself, with handsome and neat black hair. Black sunglasses covered most of his face, and he was also wearing the same black leather suit. Even if you just look at his figure, this guy in sunglasses is still a handsome guy who attracts attention. The young ladies and ladies coming and going all give him warm and curious looks, wanting to eat him in one bite. "Hello, sir." Luo Lant opened the window and waved to the man in sunglasses. "Do you want to rent a house?" The man in sunglasses looked up at him, then walked away silently. Hey, I'm not a weird uncle. Don't run away." Luo Lant almost stepped on the windowsill and jumped out. "I tell you, this empty room must not be rented. There is something wrong with it. It will be haunted at night." The word haunted made the handsome boy pause for a moment, but he quickly walked away. Luo Lianti knew that young people today were not afraid of anything. In order to prevent this handsome young man from foolishly insisting on renting this empty house, he had to make preparations in advance. That it was haunted was just a lie he told casually. The house next to his clinic had another terrifying truth. That truth must not be faced by ordinary humans. Chapter 2: Supernatural House. At night, Luo Lamp put on a white coat and quietly approached the empty house with a homemade pistol filled with pure silver bullets. As he expected, the house that was empty during the day was filled with strange candlelight at night. The candlelight moved slowly from one window to another, from the first floor to the second floor, as if someone was walking around the house with a candle. Even if Luo Lant calls herself a materialist who believes in science, she couldn't help but feel a little creeped out when she saw the scene. This strange scene started 2 months ago. Late one night, while Luo Lant was working hard in the laboratory, she accidentally saw through the curtains a ball of light floating in the empty house opposite that had been unoccupied for several years. At that time, he was so frightened that he almost knocked over the blood in the beaker. Only later did he realize that it was the light of a candle. From that night on, the empty house seemed to be occupied by strange people. Luo Lianti once thought that a criminal gang used this place as a base or something, but soon discovered the truth of the matter. The people holding candles change frequently, but they are all handsome men and beauties. Those beauties wear long black cloaks, hold candlesticks, and wander around every corner of the empty house every night. The candlelight illuminated their pale faces. Years of experience allowed Luo Lianti to tell at a glance that they were not humans, but vampires. This empty house was occupied by a large number of vampires. It was abnormal for vampires who were arrogant by nature and liked to live alone to gather in large numbers, so Luo Lianti was careful about this. Although he went to explore several times and was blocked from the door, the doubts in his heart still lingered. Concerned that the boy in sunglasses might rent this room, the kind-hearted Dr. Luo Lant took action again tonight. If nothing is found, the future of the boy with sunglasses will be left to fate. Maybe God will really care for those who persevere. As soon as she jumped into the garden, Laurent found the back door wide open. He ducked in, loaded the gun, dodged the candlelight, and finally slipped to the second floor. Unexpectedly, the second floor also echoed with the dim light of fire. In the musty living room, a group of vampires wearing black cloaks were standing in a circle and muttering something. The 3 people standing in the innermost circle each held a candlestick in their hands. "Dedicated to you the pure blood of the boy, may you guide us on the way to the temple." The voices of the vampires were uniform, and the long black shadows dragged out by the candlelight were filled with an eerie and eerie atmosphere. However, what surprised Luo Liani the most was what they said. Are these guys looking for the paradise of the vampires recorded in the history books, the temple? It is said that the vampires in the temple will no longer be afraid of the sun, nor will they long for blood, and will become a truly immortal and immortal race. But finding the temple requires complicated sacrificial methods, and no one has yet been able to confirm its existence. Through the overlapping figures, Luo Lianti saw a black-haired boy surrounded, his hands tightly bound together by a shackle hanging from the ceiling. Was the poor child captured as a sacrifice? Lorente sighed, raised her hand, and fired a few shots. The bullets that shot out hit the candlesticks in the hands of the 3 vampires. The silver candlesticks fell to the floor, and the flames flickered for a few times before disappearing. The living room suddenly became dark. The vampires, who were concentrating on the sacrifice, did not expect this sudden episode and suddenly started to commotion in surprise. Taking advantage of the brief chaos, Luo Lant sneaked into the crowd and broke the shackles between the boy's wrists with one shot. Fortunately, these vampires didn't seem to be good at dealing with emergencies. They just got into chaos, but didn't know how to calm down quickly and restore order. This made Luo Liani even have the time to regret that she wore this too conspicuous white dress. If he were wearing black, he might just have to break 2 candlesticks, and then he would need to use the moonlight to barely identify the boy's position like now. Alas, I am not a professional after all. Young man, let's go. Don't make any sound. Luo Lant reached the boy's side, grabbed his collar, and lifted him up from the ground. However, just as he was about to lift the boy onto his shoulders, the boy suddenly opened his eyes. Under the moonlight, his eyes were as eye-catching as obsidian, with a cold light. For a moment, Luo Lianti seemed to read the message get away from his eyes and felt a panic. "Ha, don't you want to be carried away? But the situation is urgent. Please bear with me. I will take you to your mother later," casually patted the boy's butt, and Luo Lant threw him onto her shoulders like a sack. At this time, the commotion among the vampires seemed to have calmed down. Luo Lianti quickly fired a few more shots behind him. After diverting the opponent's attraction, he fled in the opposite direction to the first floor. Humph! Luckily, he was well prepared. You must know that the bullets he fired contained the high concentration of blood that the vampires loved most, which was enough to make them fascinated. Otherwise, amateur hunters like him would not be able to escape from their hands. But it would be useless even if he escaped from the living room on the 2nd floor. Carrying the boy around on the 1st floor of the house, Laurent gradually realized something terrible. Do you know how to get out?" he asked the boy on his shoulder quietly. "Aren't you leading the way?" the boy asked coldly. Luo Lianti was panicked. You must know how difficult it is for him, a super-directional idiot who can't even tell the difference between left and right, to find the door out of a strange big house with no lights at night like this. How could he forget this most critical issue? At this time, the nerve endings detected a strange feeling, and Luo Lant turned her head. In an instant, a gust of wind mixed with a black shadow came towards his face. He subconsciously turned sideways to avoid it, but he still missed it a little. There was a stabbing pain in his left shoulder. It was a vampire sneaking up on him. He turned and fired, but missed, the bullet ricocheting off the wall with sparks. Carrying the boy and jumping back a few steps, he faced off against a vampire in the darkness. Under the other person's black cloak, a pair of crimson eyes flashed with an almost crazy light, letting Luo Lianti know that he was extremely hungry. But why? Even an old and frail vampire can easily hunt animals and fill their stomachs with their blood. This vampire is obviously not in his final years. How could he be so hungry? Not enough food or too much appetite. What's bothering you?" he asked hesitantly. "You look like you're dying of hunger." The vampire made an unexplained hissing sound, and the hands exposed outside the cloak were thin and withered, looking ferocious, but not daring to attack. Just when Luo Lant wanted to take the initiative to walk up, the right shoulder carrying the boy suddenly felt heavy. His body instantly lost balance, and he was extremely surprised to see a layer of black mist suddenly covering his vision. Immediately afterwards, he was suddenly kicked in the chest. The huge recoil made him scream, "Ouch!" and his whole body flew out and hit the wall, making stars appear in his eyes. Rubbing her head and getting up from the ground, Luo Lant found that the boy was gone. Between him and the vampire, a tall young man appeared at some point. "You dare to talk to a hungry vampire? Can you be any more stupid?" Turning his head slightly, the young man shot a cold look at Luo Lant. You are Dash." Luo Lant was dumbfounded. Aren't these eyes exactly the same as that of the boy just now? Is he dreaming? A 10-year-old child suddenly turned into an adult in front of him. Is there really a secret spell of rejuvenation or rejuvenation in the world? Then, he discovered something even more shocking. Although he was not wearing sunglasses, this young man was clearly the renter who stood outside the house and watched nonstop during the day. This kind of handsome, tall, and perfect figure that even a man like him is envious of is not often seen. He looked at the young man's back and confirmed that he would never admit his mistake. What happened? Why did he suddenly not understand the world at all? Just when Luo Liandi's brain was in chaos, the black-haired young man had already rushed towards the vampire, and at the same time, he waved his right hand and suddenly grabbed the opponent's neck and tightened it hard. Boom! With a loud noise, the young man mercilessly slammed the vampire's body against the wall, and the huge force smashed a big hole in the wall. The too brutal fighting style made Luo Lianti couldn't help but close his eyes. He heard the gurgling sound from the neck of the vampire in his ears. When he opened his eyes again, he saw that the guy had already died. The young man took back his hand and patted it twice, with no trace of emotion on his calm face. Someone may have heard the noise here. He looked at Loran. We need to leave quickly. Those cold eyes suddenly made Luo Lant's body stiffen. Something seemed to appear in his consciousness, but before he could grasp it accurately, the young man had already pulled up his clothes and rushed towards the nearest glass window. Bang! The glass made a shattering sound, and two people curled up and jumped out of the window, rolling down on the grass outside. The young man stood up first, and before Luo Lant could catch his breath, he grabbed his clothes again and pulled him out of the house. The two eventually returned to Lauren's clinic and apartment. It had been several years since she had exercised so strenuously. Lauren lay panting on the sofa like a dead dog, unable to even say a word to the young man. However, the young man sitting on the sofa opposite has returned to his normal state, sitting upright with his breath intact, waiting for the owner of the house in front of him to catch his breath. You are also a vampire, right? Luo Lianti asked the young man while panting heavily, and received a nod in response. The young man's power in attacking the vampire just now was astonishingly powerful. It is impossible for ordinary humans to have such terrifying strength. And if you look carefully, your coat looks familiar. Finally, letting her breathing return to its original frequency, Luo Lant stood up and reached out to open the collar of the young man's coat. There was a round golden badge on the back of the collar. Luo Lant stared at the badge and slowly read out the meaning of the abbreviations on it. A-level vampire hunter from the Blood Affairs Department. Fei Yi. In response to him, the young man gave a simple nod. Luo Lant lost her strength for a moment. It turned out that the guy he saved was actually a vampire hunter from the Ministry of Affairs. Chapter 3 A-Class Vampire Hunter. Because of the distance during the day, Luo Lant did not see clearly that Fei was wearing the uniform of the Blood Affairs Department. If he had been more serious at that time, he would not have regarded him as a young renter, and he would never have messed up in this muddy water. Of course, he would not have messed up Fei Ye's work and even injured himself. Sure enough, he is still too nosy. Regarding Lauren's slowness and delay, Mr. Hunter seemed to have no intention of asking him to accuse him. 20 minutes later, Luo Lant, who was hungry due to strenuous exercise, was holding a plate of pie and stuffing it into her mouth while listening to Fei Ye's description of his mission. A few years ago, there was a strange rumor among the vampires, saying that in a few years, all the vampires on the Red Earth continent would die. The only way to survive is to go to the legendary temple, which is the eternal home of the vampires. The key that can open the way to the temple is something called pure blood contained in a human body. So vampires all over the world began to look for humans with pure blood. Some vampires believe that pure blood is more likely to appear in children. So, what kind of sacrifice would those people perform in the empty room next door? Do they need a little boy as a sacrifice? Luo Lianti interjected and asked, "Did you get caught by them on purpose?" For a moment, Feiya's calm face showed an expression that looked like she wanted to beat someone up. Luo Lant hurriedly hid in the corner of the sofa with a pie plate in her arms to prevent Fei Yi from suddenly going berserk and beating him up until he couldn't take care of himself. I finally found the stronghold of these vampires. Fei Yi clenched her fists tightly, and what looked like veins appeared on the back of her hands. I can adjust my appearance age according to the time when my body is exposed to sunlight, so I can temporarily turn into a child and pretend to fall into their hands. The original plan of the Blood Affairs Department was to use me to kill all these vampires, but I didn't expect the critical moment. I suddenly barged in. Luo Lant took the initiative to lower her head and admitted her mistake. "It's all my fault. Just hit me, but don't hit me too hard. Even if I beat you to death, the ruined plan cannot be restored to its original state. What about sending others to infiltrate? You underestimate the vampire's intelligence. So, you're going to be fired? No. I have other tasks that can make up for this failure." Other tasks? Laurent fantasized about what that mission might be and suddenly became frightened. He seemed to read something terrible from Fei's overly calm reaction. What are the other tasks? Is it related to the calm state he is sitting here in now? Having said that, Fei seemed to follow him back to the clinic naturally. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't he report the news of the failure of the operation to his superiors? So maybe he's going to be in bad luck. The other mission you mentioned is to capture me, the person who disrupted the plan, to the Ministry of Affairs for execution. Luo Lant turned around and hid behind the sofa. Fei Yi responded silently. "Will you kill me directly after you capture me?" Still silent. Then let me take a shower and change into clean clothes first. Fei's excessive silence made Luo Lant even more frightened. Without waiting for a reply, she fled into her bedroom and locked the door behind her. Pacing back and forth in the bedroom with her hands behind her back, the two thoughts of obeying or escape were at war in Laurente's mind. He didn't know whether the Blood Affairs Department was taking a gentle or a cruel route, and he couldn't imagine how they would treat a stupid human being like him who was holding back. Just when he didn't know what to do, a large shadow suddenly slowly covered him from behind. He turned around in surprise and was shocked to see Fei's face magnified several times before his eyes. He was so frightened that he couldn't even make a sound for a moment. The locked door couldn't stop Fei at all. Behind him, Luo Lant saw that the door handle of his bedroom had been broken. You can't even wait for a moment, and you're going to take me away?" Luo Lant was about to cry without tears. She ran deeper into the bedroom on her hands and knees and accidentally bumped into the large wardrobe. The expressionless Fei Yi caught up with him in 2 or 3 steps, blocked Luo Lant, and punched the closet door. With such a light punch, the closet door was shattered into pieces, and the pieces of wood fell to the ground in pieces. Luo Lant thought that the next punch was going to fall on her face, so she quickly put her head in her hands and closed her eyes, even preparing to faint. But after waiting and waiting, he still didn't get that punch, which made him open his right eye a little bit curiously. Fei still kept hitting the closet door with her fist and remained motionless. "Hey," Luo Lianti wanted to ask him if he suddenly died or if he was hungry. Just as he was preparing a question, Fei suddenly let out a sigh. "I just said so much. Don't you feel anything at all?" He retracted his fist and used his fingers to flick the sawdust that fell from Luo Lianti's collar. Question mark. Luo Lianti looked at him confused. "Is it true that you can't remember the things I mentioned at all? Silver bullet. Professor Loran. The blank expression on Luo Liani's face lasted for 2 seconds, and then gradually turned into helplessness, just like he did that night when the vampire called him this nickname. You young people, can't you stop giving people incomprehensible nicknames and call people by their proper names? He sighed and shook his head. So, you still remember your nickname. Faye's eyes were fixed on the hole that she had smashed open in the closet door, and she put her hand into the hole. Inside were all Luo Lance's neatly folded coats. Faye touched for a while and pulled out a black coat from inside. This coat was exactly the same as the one he was wearing, and there was a round golden badge that fell out with the coat. The badge fell to the ground and made a ding sound. Faye picked it up and brought it to Luoland. Professor Chris Fairloron, the Silver Bullet, senior researcher of the Blood Affairs Department, is good at using guns. He was once responsible for a number of world-class scientific research tasks. His main job was to study the difference in blood composition between vampires and humans. However, the professor suddenly disappeared 5 years ago, and no one has known his whereabouts since then. Faye said word by word, staring closely into Lauren's eyes. It might not be appropriate to say missing. It would be more accurate to say ran away. Luo Lance scratched her hair in shame. Why? Because I lost my memory. It's not appropriate to say that she lost her memory, because Luo Lant could barely remember her true identity, as Fei Yi said. He still remembered that he was once a member of the Blood Affairs Department, but that memory could only go back to 5 years ago. He vaguely remembered that he made a mistake at work that day, and that mistake caused very serious consequences. It seemed that someone else was affected and died. His memories during this period were all vague. When he woke up, he was already running on the road to escape with his luggage on his back. What mistake did he make? How serious was the mistake? How many people died? He couldn't remember any of these things. The only clear thought was that he could never go back. He couldn't remember the reason why he couldn't go back, and he even forgot the way back to the Ministry of Affairs. After a long period of sorting, he finally clarified the mess in his mind. Only 4 things were left in a nearly blank memory area. 1, he is a researcher in the Blood Affairs Department and has rich experience and knowledge. 2, he made serious mistakes at work. 3, he must never return to the Ministry of Affairs, for he still has a mission. This task is to continue to study the mystery of the blood composition of species. Of course, he has forgotten the reason. I also plan to try to recall more things, but all attempts ended in failure. In the end, Lorente, who was easygoing by nature, simply stopped worrying about her past and followed her body's instincts to settle down in the strange city of Trinvanden. She lived, worked, and researched, and became a community doctor from beginning to end. Oh, and occasionally hunt vampires on the side. However, can such a peaceful life really not last a lifetime? You want to take me back to the Ministry of Affairs for execution? He asked Faye. For my work mistakes 5 years ago and my trouble today? Maybe. Faye answered ambiguously. Can you get my lost memory back first? What happened to me 5 years ago? You want to know? Luo Lan thought Faye's reaction was a bit strange, as if she wanted to say something but deliberately didn't say it. He tilted his head and stared at the expressionless face for a long time, but still couldn't see any clues. Science majors are really not good at discerning people's hearts. I can tell you what happened 5 years ago, but there is a condition. Faye spoke again at this time. I don't have the money, and I'm not willing to sell myself. I don't care about these things either. Faye suddenly showed an expression that wanted to hit someone. It's a mission. As I said just now, there is a mission to make up for the failure of tonight's operation. Oh, what is it? Go find the legendary temple of the Blood Clan. Me and you. Good night. I must be too sleepy, so I'm dreaming. 2 seconds later, Luo Lant yawned and turned around to leave. Give me a little more. Faye immediately strangled his neck. This is a top-secret task directly assigned by the top management of the Blood Affairs Department. If it succeeds, you can make any request as reward. Then what if I don't agree, or the mission doesn't succeed? Luo Lant asked back, but he soon knew the answer, because Fei Ye's fingers around his neck slowly tightened, giving him a suffocating pleasure. No matter how smart a doctor is, he, an ordinary human, is no match for the vampires. He knows that if Fei Yi is willing, he can take out his internal organs at any time and stuff them back one by one. Destiny is so unpredictable. I was still drinking orange juice leisurely during the day, so why did the plot suddenly progress at night to the point where I was forced to embark on an unknown journey with a vampire? Luo Lant was confused and sad. You must know that he really likes the peaceful life in the city. At this time, there was a loud noise outside the window, interrupting Luo Lant's emotion. He subconsciously turned his head to look out the window and was surprised to see a pair of crazy, red blood pupils. A hungry vampire was lying on the window frame and looking at him eerily, its red tongue covered in saliva, leaving a disgusting, wet mark on the glass. Luo Lant suddenly felt terrified. Just when he was about to look for a gun to shoot, Fei Yi had already let go of his neck and rushed towards the window. The vampire next door has discovered us. Pack your bags and go to the port. Meet me there. But Luo Lianti only had time to say 2 words before Fei Yi jumped out of the window and grabbed the vampire's neck and pulled him away from the glass window. Immediately afterwards, there was a long scream outside, followed by the sound of fierce fighting. But I haven't agreed to accept the mission yet. Looking at the messy bedroom and listening to the sounds outside,